male cop. By sunrise, her colleagues had vanished. His voice cracked through the street like a gunshot. The night was heavy, sirens echoing in the distance, but his tone silenced everything. He stood there in a black suit that looked like it could strangle the light itself, tattoos creeping up his neck like fire spreading through paper. Her badge glinted weakly under the flickering streetlight. Her face was bruised, lips split, eyes defiant but trembling. She didn't answer. That silence enraged him more than a bullet ever could. He took a step closer, fists clenching. "Who the hell hurt you?" His words weren't just fury, they were a promise. "Before we go any deeper, tell us, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your city right next?" Things are about to get real. The moment froze. Her breath came uneven, the sting of his question still cutting through her ribs like glass. She wanted to lie, to pretend she didn't need his help, but the truth burned under her skin. The blood on her knuckles wasn't hers. The fear in her eyes wasn't for herself. He saw it, the twitch in her jaw, the half-swallowed tremor in her voice, and that was enough. He didn't wait for her permission. His hand shot out, gripping her shoulder, forcing her to face him fully. The bruises along her cheek told him everything words couldn't. Someone had laid hands on his cop, his informant, his unexpected ally, the one woman who had dared to tell him no and survived. She tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. Not in anger this time, in resolve. He wasn't asking anymore. He was demanding blood. She spat out the metallic taste of fear and whispered the only thing she could manage. "Don't." But he already knew that word never worked on him. He turned toward the alley, where shadows moved like rats. He'd heard the whispers for days. Someone inside her department had been feeding information to a rival crew. And now, looking at her face, he knew exactly who had sent the message. They hadn't just hit her. They had marked her. A warning. A declaration. To him. He cracked his neck slowly, eyes burning with the kind of rage that couldn't be hidden behind polished leather shoes and Italian suits. His men waited across the street, watching every flicker of his movement. He didn't even have to speak. One look, and they understood. Engines roared to life. Someone was going to bleed tonight. She tried to stop him, stepping in front of him, shaking her head. He ignored her. His world didn't move by rules or reports or ethics. It moved by retribution. If they wanted war, they'd get it. He reached for his coat pocket and pulled out the silver lighter she'd once confiscated from him, engraved with initials she hadn't dared ask about. He flicked it open, flame dancing between them. She looked at him, bruised, shaking, torn between duty and loyalty she couldn't explain. "You don't get to do this," she said, her voice cracking but firm. He smirked. "Watch me." He tossed the lighter into the trash can beside them, and within seconds, the fire caught. The streetlight flickered again, reflecting the chaos about to unfold. His men disappeared into the night, spreading out like wolves unleashed from a cage. She hated that part of her didn't move to stop him. That part of her wanted to see them burn. The ones who had cornered her behind the precinct, 3 against 1, taking turns throwing punches while laughing about her little deal with the devil. They didn't know that devil had claws sharper than theirs. Her knees gave out. The adrenaline faded, leaving only the pain. He caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her close, steadying her. The scent of gunpowder clung to his jacket. His voice dropped low, dangerous, soft enough that only she could hear it. "I told you, you're under my protection. You should have come to me first." Her eyes burned, not from pain but from shame. She didn't want to owe him, didn't want to need him. But the truth was, in a city crawling with corruption, he was the only one who didn't lie to her face. He was the criminal who kept his word while her own brothers in blue broke theirs. Sirens wailed again, this time closer. He lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. "When they find out who did this, they'll wish they never touched you." She wanted to argue, to say she didn't want revenge, but the memory of fists and laughter silenced her. One of his men pulled up in a matte black car, headlights cutting through the smoke rising from the trash fire. He gestured for her to get in. She shook her head, trying to cling to the last fragments of control she had left. He leaned in, his voice low enough to send chills through her. "You can walk away now, But if you do, I can't promise you'll be alive by morning. That was the truth, and they both knew it. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. The car smelled like leather, smoke, and danger. He slid in beside her, silent for a moment, letting the tension breathe. Then he spoke. Not a threat, not a question, but a vow. Whoever hurt you, they don't get to wake up tomorrow. She turned to look at him, face half lit by passing streetlights. The thought terrified her, not because he meant it, but because a small part of her wanted to see it happen. She wanted to stop being the victim. The car sped through the city like a bullet, cutting through red lights, sirens fading behind them. Her phone buzzed. Messages from her captain, her colleagues, but she didn't answer. They had left her to rot. They'd made her the target. And now, she was sitting beside the man they'd warned her about for years, the one they claimed was the city's devil incarnate. But right now, that devil was the only one who cared enough to ask who the hell hurt her. The car stopped abruptly near an abandoned warehouse. His men were already there, waiting. A few had blood on their shirts, not theirs. He got out first, rolling his sleeves up, veins pulsing like coiled steel. She followed, every step heavier than the last. Inside, tied to a chair, was one of her own, Officer Trent, the same man who'd laughed while holding her down. His face was swollen now, lips split, but still sneering. She froze. The sight hit her like a tidal wave. The boss glanced back at her. You want to walk away? Do it now. Otherwise, this is on you. She didn't move, didn't blink. He took that as her answer. He stepped forward, the floor creaking under his weight, and with one swift motion, he grabbed Trent by the collar. The air changed. The tension snapped. And in that moment, just before the screaming started, she realized something terrifying. Justice didn't always come in uniform. Sometimes it wore a suit. The scream tore through the warehouse like a gunshot, sharp and echoing off the walls. The Mafia boss didn't flinch. His expression stayed carved in ice, his knuckles tightening as he pressed Trent's face against the cold metal chair. The officer spat blood and curses, but none of it mattered. The boss leaned closer, his voice low, dangerous, calm enough to make the men around him step back without being told. He asked once more, slowly this time, like he was savoring the words. Who hurt her first? Trent coughed, choking on his pride, on his arrogance that was melting away under the weight of his fear. He tried to laugh, but the sound came out broken. She watched, frozen, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out her thoughts. Every bruise on her body screamed for revenge. Every muscle ached for justice. But watching it happen, watching this man do what the system never could, felt like standing at the edge of something she couldn't turn back from. The boss turned to her suddenly, eyes burning into hers. You sure about this? One nod and I'll stop. One word and he walks out. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at Trent again, at the man who'd held her down, and laughed while others took turns. He had been her colleague, her backup, her supposed brother in blue. And now, seeing him tied to that chair, all she could feel was the rage she had buried under layers of professionalism and silence. She didn't nod. She didn't move. That was all the answer he needed. The boss struck again, a punch that sounded like thunder. Trent's head snapped back, blood spraying across the floor. His men didn't even blink. They'd seen worse. They'd done worse. But none of them missed the look on her face. The way her trembling turned to stillness. The way the light in her eyes shifted from fear to something darker. The boss grabbed Trent by the collar again, forcing him upright. You think wearing that badge makes you untouchable? You think you can break her and walk away? He threw him to the ground, kicking the chair aside like it was nothing. Every movement was precision, not wild anger, but deliberate punishment. She turned away for a moment, pressing a hand to her mouth. The metallic taste of blood from her own split lip still lingered, and the sound of Trent's ragged breathing filled her ears. She wanted to scream, to make it stop, but her voice was gone. The boss walked toward her slowly, the fury still pulsing beneath his calm. He reached out, brushing a streak of blood off her sleeve with a thumb. You can go if you want, he said quietly. I'll finish it. She looked up at him, really looked. The tattoos on his neck, the scars on his knuckles, the storm behind his eyes. He wasn't doing this for sport. He was doing it for her. for what they'd done to her. And for the first time, she didn't stop him. Trent started begging. His words spilled out fast, desperate, promising silence, promising money, promising anything. He said the names, one by one. The officers who'd planned it. The lieutenant who had given the order. The captain who had turned a blind eye. Each name made her skin crawl. Each name was a knife twisting deeper into her chest. The boss nodded once, as if confirming what he already knew. Then he told his men to let Trent crawl out. She froze, confused, but then she saw it. The silent signal. The kind that meant only one thing in his world. Trent wouldn't make it 2 blocks. The men stepped aside, letting the battered officer stumble toward the exit. The boss stood still, lighting a cigarette, watching the blood drip from his own knuckles. She couldn't look away. He exhaled smoke slowly, turning his head slightly toward her. He's got an hour, maybe 2, before they find him. You still think your badge protects anyone? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She knew now. The uniform she wore meant nothing in a city where the powerful ate their own. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of his anger still radiating from him. You're in this now, he said softly. They'll come for you next. You know that, right? She nodded, her throat tight. I know. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't amusement. It was respect. The sound of an engine roared outside, one of his cars pulling up. He motioned to his men, and they started clearing the scene, efficient and silent. He turned back to her one last time before walking out. You're staying with me tonight. That wasn't a question. She hesitated, but deep down, she knew he was right. If she went home, they'd find her before sunrise. The ride back was quiet. The city lights blurred past the window, but she barely saw them. Her mind replayed every detail. The laughter of her so-called brothers, the way they'd left her broken, the way this man, this monster, had shown her more humanity than the people sworn to protect her. At his penthouse, the silence was suffocating. He poured a drink, handed it to her, and leaned against the counter, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. You're too good for them, he said finally. That badge doesn't deserve you. She let out a bitter laugh. You think I wanted this life? You think I wanted to end up in your world? He shrugged, taking a sip of his whiskey. Doesn't matter what you wanted. You're here now. And in my world, loyalty has a price. She glared at him, but the fight in her was wearing thin. What do you want from me? He smirked slightly. The truth. Who ordered it? Not just the names. I want the reason. She hesitated. The truth was worse than she wanted to admit. They hadn't attacked her for betrayal or corruption. They'd done it because she had refused to falsify evidence against him. They'd wanted her loyalty, and she'd chosen her integrity. But now that integrity had gotten her marked, when she told him, his jaw clenched so tight she could hear the faint crack of his teeth grinding. So they wanted to use you to bury me, he said finally. Guess they didn't realize who they were dealing with. He put his glass down and grabbed his phone. Within seconds, his tone changed, cold, commanding. He barked orders, listing names, locations, routes. His men moved fast. She tried to stop him again. Don't do this. You'll start a war. He looked at her, eyes burning. War's already started. They just fired the first shot. She felt the room spinning, her heartbeat quick and uneven. She wasn't sure if it was fear or adrenaline. He walked over to her, stopping just inches away. His voice dropped low again. You can go back to your department tomorrow, act like none of this happened, or you can stand with me. But if you stand with me, there's no going back. The silence between them crackled with tension. Her bruised hand shook as she lifted the glass to her lips. The burn of the whiskey steadied her for just a moment. Then she set it down and looked him straight in the eye. I'm not running anymore. He smiled, a dangerous, quiet smile that said he'd just found the one person crazy enough to match his fire. Good, he said softly, because by sunrise, they'll know who you belong to. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware of the storm gathering in its heart. But somewhere, deep in the shadows, a line had been crossed. The cop and the criminal were no longer enemies. They were partners in vengeance. And by the time the sun rose, blood would answer blood. The night hadn't even finished swallowing the city when the first car exploded. The air between them buzzed with adrenaline and something else neither could name. He could feel her eyes on him, And without looking, he said in that low voice that carried command and chaos in equal measure, "They'll hit back before morning." She didn't ask how he knew. She just believed him. Her phone buzzed on the counter, one name flashing that made her stomach twist: Lieutenant Harris. She froze. He shouldn't be calling. Not after the names she'd heard last night. Not after she'd watched one of them crawl out of that warehouse, only to be found dead an hour later in the river. She didn't answer. The phone stopped, then buzzed again, then again, until he walked over and took it from her hand. He stared at the screen, then at her. "You gonna answer your old friends, or let me do it?" She shook her head, whispering that she couldn't. He pressed accept anyway. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Harris's voice cut through, cold and strained. "You made a mess, officer. We told you to stay quiet. Now 2 of ours are gone, and the captain wants her badge." She could barely breathe. Her throat locked, and her eyes darted to the Mafia boss standing beside her, his jaw flexing as he listened. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He ended the call himself, tossed the phone across the room, and said only one thing. "They think they can scare you? Let them try." He walked past her, grabbing his jacket, loading a fresh clip into his gun. She followed, her voice breaking as she said he didn't have to do this, that it would only make it worse. He stopped in the doorway, turned, and for the first time, she saw the storm behind his control. "You still don't get it," he said, stepping closer. "They broke you. They laughed about it. And now they're hunting you. If I don't finish this, they'll bury you before the week's over." Her body trembled, but not from fear anymore. From fire. The same fire she saw burning in him. She took a step forward, standing toe-to-toe with him. "Then I'm coming with you." He laughed once, low and disbelieving, but her stare didn't waver. "Fine," he said finally, "but you follow my lead." Minutes later, they were in the car, the city flashing past in streaks of neon and rain. His men trailed behind in black SUVs, their headlights cutting through the night like hungry wolves. The destination wasn't random. It was the captain's club, the kind of place where corruption wore expensive suits and drank aged scotch behind bulletproof glass. She'd been there once, back when she still believed the badge meant something. Now she was coming back for war. He parked 2 blocks away. She reached for her gun, but his hand shot out, stopping her. His fingers wrapped around her wrist, not rough, but firm enough that she looked up. "You shoot one of them. There's no going back." She met his gaze. "There's nothing left to go back to." He nodded once, then pulled the slide back on his pistol. "Let's make them remember your name." The next 10 minutes were chaos, wrapped in silence. His men moved like ghosts, cutting the power before the guards even realized they were under siege. She stayed close behind him, heart hammering so loud she thought it would give them away. Then the door burst open. The room erupted, shouting, scrambling, guns raised, but the Mafia boss was faster. 2 shots. One man down. Another disarmed before he even blinked. She stood there frozen for a heartbeat too long, until a hand grabbed her from behind. Training kicked in. She twisted, slammed her elbow back, fired once. The body fell at her feet. Her hands shook as smoke curled from the barrel. He looked at her across the room, eyes locked on hers, not in shock but approval. She crossed the line. There was no going back now. They found a captain in his office, trying to crawl out the back window. The boss grabbed him by the collar, dragging him across the floor like a rag doll. The man begged, breathless, swearing he didn't know what his officers had done. She stepped forward, fury shaking her voice as she listed every detail. Every night they'd threatened her, every report they'd buried, every scar they left on her skin. The captain's eyes darted from her to the man holding him, realizing too late that he wasn't dealing with the law anymore. The Mafia boss leaned close, voice calm as ice. "She tells me what you did, and I believe her. You got one chance to tell me why." The captain stuttered, blaming the lieutenant, blaming orders, blaming fear. He said her silence was part of the deal, that the department couldn't afford another scandal, that they had to make an example. Her hands curled into fists. She couldn't hear anymore. She turned away, tears mixing with rage. The boss didn't say a word. He just drew his gun and fired once. The captain collapsed, silence swallowing the room. She spun around, shock and horror tangled in her breath. He holstered the weapon, eyes still fixed on her. He was gone, she said weakly. You didn't have to. He cut her off, stepping close, voice steady. I did, because justice in your world means paperwork. In mine, it means peace. The words hit harder than the gunfire, because deep down, she knew he was right. The system had left her for dead. But this man, this criminal, had given her back her voice, her rage, her power. By the time they stepped outside, the streets were crawling with sirens. He whistled once, and his cars pulled up fast. His men covered their escape while she slid into the back seat, shaking, breath coming fast. He joined her, shirt stained with someone else's blood, eyes burning brighter than ever. You did good tonight, he said quietly. She didn't feel good. She felt hollow, electric, alive, terrified. They drove in silence. Then she whispered, what happens now? He looked out the window, the faintest smirk curving his lips. Now they'll come for me. And you. But they won't win. Because they made a mistake. They forgot what happens when you hurt someone with nothing left to lose. Her pulse quickened again. He turned to her, voice low, rough with something almost like respect. You're one of us now, whether you like it or not. And in that car, surrounded by the smell of smoke and gunpowder, she realized he wasn't wrong. The line between justice and vengeance had blurred so far it was gone. When dawn finally broke, the news hit the airwaves. The explosion, the missing officers, the captain found dead in his office. Her name wasn't mentioned, but every cop in the city knew. And somewhere in the shadows, the Mafia boss watched the headlines from his window, cigarette burning between his fingers. He glanced over his shoulder, where she stood in his shirt, bruised and silent, watching the same story play out. His voice cut through the quiet. You see, by sunrise, they finally remembered what fear feels like. And she realized he wasn't the monster she thought he was. He was the balance the city had forgotten. And now, she was part of it. She didn't sleep that night. Not for a second. The news kept looping, sirens in the distance kept echoing, and the blood on her hands wouldn't wash away no matter how hard she tried. He had disappeared hours earlier without saying where he was going. All he said before walking out was, "Don't open that door for anyone, not even me." And now, as dawn clawed its way into the room, she sat by the window, wrapped in his jacket, watching the streets move like nothing had happened. But she knew something was coming. The silence before the storm was deafening. Her phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. She stared at it, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won. The voice on the other end was calm, almost kind. You don't know me, but I know what you've done. I know who you're with. And I know who you used to be. You have one chance to walk away before they burn you with him. She froze. The line clicked dead. She tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. Her chest tightened as she realized what it meant. Someone inside the department was cleaning house, and she was next. The sound of an engine roared below. Her heart spiked, hand reaching for the gun beside her. The elevator door opened down the hall, slow, metallic, echoing too long. She stood, raising the weapon, every muscle screaming. The footsteps that followed were heavy, deliberate, not his. Then, just before she could move, the door burst open and chaos flooded in. 3 masked men. No hesitation. The first lunged. She fired once, the recoil jolting through her arm. The man dropped. Another grabbed her from behind, slamming her against the wall. Her vision blurred as she twisted, elbowed him hard, shot again. Blood splattered across the tiles. The third man rushed her. She ducked, felt the wind of the knife slice past her ear, and shot him point blank. The silence that followed was louder than the gunfire. She stood panting, body shaking, staring at the mess around her. The phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She answered breathless. It was him. His voice was darker than usual, colder. They came early. Are you hurt? She said she was fine. He didn't respond. Then, quietly, he said what she already knew. They were after her now, too. The department, the rival family, everyone. The line went quiet. Then he said, pack your things. We're not hiding anymore. When he arrived minutes later, his car skidded into the alley, doors swinging open before it even stopped. His eyes scanned her face, then the bodies behind her. Without a word, he grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the car. She tried to speak, but he cut her off. Later, they sped off, tires screaming. The city blurred past in flashes of sirens and smoke. He drove fast, jaw tight, eyes locked on the road. He didn't speak until they hit the outskirts, the skyline shrinking in the mirror. He said he knew who was behind it, the name she'd been too afraid to say. The lieutenant, her old partner, the one who set her up, the one who turned her into bait. He said the man had sold her location to both sides, hoping to watch them destroy each other. She felt sick. The betrayal was deeper than the bullet wounds she carried. He looked at her, his tone sharp enough to cut through the engine noise. You still want to play cop? You still think they'll save you? She didn't answer, because now she knew the badge had never been protection. It was a target. They stopped at a warehouse by the docks. His men were already waiting, engines idling, weapons loaded. She recognized the look in their eyes. They were preparing for war. He told her to stay in the car. She refused. He stared at her for a long second, then tossed her spare gun. You follow my lead, or you die. No hesitation. She nodded. Inside, the air reeked of oil and gunpowder. Shadows moved between crates. Then she saw him, her former partner, standing by the staircase, a smirk twisting his face. She'd once trusted that smirk. Now it made her want to pull the trigger. He taunted her, calling her a traitor, asking how it felt sleeping next to a murderer. She didn't blink. The Mafia boss stepped forward, gun raised, voice quiet but deadly. Tell me why. Why her? The man laughed, saying she was disposable, that she got too close to something meant to stay buried. He said the department had been working with the syndicate long before she ever joined, that she was supposed to take the fall when things went south. She could barely breathe. Every truth he spilled was a blade twisting deeper. The boss didn't wait. One shot. The man dropped to his knees, clutching his chest. He gasped something about files, about evidence. Then he pointed to the corner, a briefcase. She ran, grabbed it, flipped it open. Inside, photos, documents, payment records, everything linking the police to organized crime. Her stomach twisted. Her entire career had been built on lies. She turned to him, holding the proof in shaking hands. He stared at it, then at her. You can't take that back, he said. She nodded. I'm not going to. I'm going to burn it. But before she could, the sound of engines roared outside. His men tensed. He cursed under his breath. They'd been followed. She ducked behind a crate as bullets shattered the windows. The firefight exploded, deafening, relentless. He returned fire, his movements surgical, precise. She caught glimpses of his face between muzzle flashes, calm, unbreakable. But the numbers kept coming. She spotted the lieutenant crawling for a gun on the floor. She shouted, fire missed. The boss turned just in time, putting a bullet through the man's wrist. He screamed. The boss walked over, pressed the barrel to his forehead, and asked again, almost softly, who ordered it? The lieutenant spat blood, muttering a single name, a name that made her freeze. The commissioner, the same man who pinned medals on her chest 2 years ago, the same man who called her a hero. She felt her knees give out. The boss's expression didn't change. He fired once more. The sound rang like thunder. Then there was silence. Smoke filled the air. His men dragged out the survivors. She stood there staring at the bodies, at the chaos, at everything she used to believe turning to ash around her. He walked over, took the briefcase from her hand, and tossed it into the fire. She asked why. That was proof, she said. He shook his head. That was a leash. You want to be free, you burn the chains too. She didn't argue. She watched the flames eat the last pieces of her old life. And for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt clean. Empty, but clean. Outside, dawn was breaking, soft and cruel. He leaned against the car, lighting his cigarette. You know what happens now? He said quietly. They'll come for us both. She said she knew. He smirked. Good. Then you'd better be ready to make them regret it. She stared at him. The man who once terrified her, now standing as her only truth. And deep down, she realized something dangerous. She wasn't following him anymore. She was becoming him. He took one last drag, flicked the cigarette away, and opened the door for her. She climbed in without a word. The city waited ahead, bleeding light across the horizon. He turned the key, the engine growled, and for the first time, she didn't look back. Because the war wasn't over. It was only beginning. And this time, it wasn't about survival. It was about vengeance. The next morning came with fire and consequence. News channels across the city erupted with panic. The commissioner was dead, his mansion burned to the ground, and half the department had gone missing overnight. The city was paralyzed. No one spoke about it publicly, but everyone whispered the same question. Who did this? She sat in the passenger seat of the black car, eyes hidden behind dark glasses, watching reporters stumble over the words she already knew the truth of. They thought the city had witnessed a tragedy. What they didn't know was that it had witnessed justice. He drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting against his jaw, cigarette burning low between his fingers. The smoke drifted out the window, curling into the morning air. They didn't need to talk. Both knew what came next. Power had no vacuum. Someone would fill it. Someone always did. He turned onto the bridge, slowing down as they reached the midpoint. She could see the skyline stretching across the horizon, bright, golden, almost peaceful. But peace was a lie. He told her to take one last look, because after tonight, this city wouldn't look the same. He had a meeting set, not a negotiation, a reckoning. They arrived at a dockyard where his most trusted men waited. Every face was tense, every weapon loaded. But when she stepped out beside him, they all looked confused. The boss had never brought anyone to a sit-down before, let alone a woman in a leather jacket with the kind of eyes that said she'd seen hell and walked back. He told them flatly, "She's with me." That was all it took. No one questioned him again. They went inside. The enemy family sat waiting, smug, arrogant, thinking they could talk him into a truce. But he wasn't here to talk. He laid a single envelope on the table. Photos, ledgers, names. Proof that every one of them had been feeding information to corrupt cops for years. The rival boss tried to speak, but she was the one who moved first. She pulled her gun, placed it flat on the table, and said in a voice that cut through the air like a blade, "You tried to bury me. Now I'm here to return the favor." The tension shattered. Guns were drawn. His men were ready. The dockyard exploded into chaos. The fight was fast and brutal. She moved like lightning, every shot measured, every movement controlled. He covered her flank, his precision deadly. When it was over, the rival boss lay on the floor, bleeding out, eyes wide with disbelief. He knelt beside him, whispering the same words he'd once told her. "Tell me his name." But this time it wasn't vengeance, it was closure. The man stammered, naming the last one, pulling the strings, a senator, someone untouchable. She felt her stomach drop. The web went higher than either of them thought. But the boss didn't flinch. He simply stood, said 2 words, "We end it." By midnight, they were standing outside a penthouse overlooking the city lights. The guards were already neutralized, the path clear. She didn't hesitate anymore. Together, they stormed in. The senator begged, offered money, power, anything. She raised her gun. He stopped her, stepping forward. "This isn't your burden anymore," he said softly. She looked at him, the man who once terrified her, now protecting her from her own demons. She lowered the weapon, tears burning her eyes. He turned, fired once. Silence followed. When they walked out, the city below was trembling, unaware that the war it feared had just ended in one shot. The storm that had torn through the streets finally broke into calm. Sirens wailed in the distance, but no one dared come closer. The boss stood at the edge of the rooftop, wind tearing through his coat. She walked up beside him, their silhouettes framed by dawn. For the first time, he wasn't her captor, her savior, or her enemy. He was her equal. He said he was done. No more blood, no more wars. He wanted to vanish, rebuild, disappear into somewhere quiet. She asked what about her. He smiled faintly. "You were never mine to keep. You were mine to save." She couldn't speak. He turned to walk away, but she stopped him, hand gripping his arm. "You saved me," she said. "Now let me save you." He stared at her, unreadable, then laughed quietly. Something rare, almost human. "Fine," he said, "but only if you can keep up." They left together as the sun rose, engines roaring one last time. Behind them, the city woke to a new world. No commissioner, no senator, no rival family. Just whispers of a shadow couple who'd burned everything rotten to the ground and disappeared before dawn. She looked out the window, the reflection of the city lights dancing across her eyes. He reached over, brushed a streak of dried blood from her cheek, and said, "You wanted justice. You got it." She whispered, "No, we got it." The radio played faintly. News anchors spinning half-truths, politicians pretending control. But under all that noise, one thing was clear. They weren't ghosts. They were legend. And legends don't die. The car vanished into the morning fog. Two souls forged by fire, bound by vengeance, and freed by something neither of them had believed in anymore: mercy. When the lines between justice and vengeance blurred, two broken souls found their truth in each other's chaos. She entered his world to survive. He found redemption in her defiance. Together, they turned pain into power and left behind a city trembling with respect, fear, and silent gratitude. What did you think of their ending? Drop your thoughts in the